The drive up to Muskoka always took about 2.5 hours from Toronto, and every single time, without fail, my daughter Lily would fall asleep somewhere around Barrie. That October, she was out cold before we even hit the 400, her cheek pressed against the car window, her little hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd named Gerald after my uncle's dog. My husband Mark reached over from the driver's seat and rested his hand on my knee for a second without saying anything. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Small, quiet gestures that said more than words. He knew how much this weekend was weighing on me. It was Canadian Thanksgiving, the long weekend in October that my family had turned into an annual pilgrimage to my parents' cottage on the lake. My mom had started the tradition when my brother and I were kids, back when things were simpler and the cottage felt magical and the smell of wood smoke and roasting turkey meant safety. I hadn't felt that way about it in a long time. Still, I told myself this year would be different. My brother had just gotten engaged to his girlfriend, and the whole family was coming together to celebrate. Even my uncle was making the drive up from Hamilton. I had bought a new sweater. I had made a cranberry sauce from scratch. I had told myself, out loud, standing in my kitchen that morning, that I was going to walk into that cottage and feel like I belonged there. I should tell you about my brother before I go any further. He was 34, 2 years older than me, and he had spent the better part of his adult life being the center of our parents' universe. Not because he was particularly talented or hardworking, but because he was loud and charming and knew exactly what to say to make my mom laugh. He had never finished his business degree. He had bounced between jobs for years. When he needed help with his down payment on his condo in Oakville, my parents wrote him a check for $40,000 without blinking. When I was putting myself through nursing school and working doubles at a restaurant on weekends and eating instant noodles 4 nights a week, my mom had told me she was proud of me for being so independent. I had never stopped being independent. I paid off my own student loans. Mark and I saved for 3 years to put a down payment on our house in Guelph. We drove used cars and packed our lunches and didn't take real vacations. I was not bitter about my own life. I loved my life. But I would be lying if I said it didn't sting sometimes. The way my parents looked at my brother like he was the sun and looked at me like I was just another thing in the sky. That Thanksgiving, I thought maybe things were shifting. My brother's engagement felt like a moment where the family would finally be all together and everyone would be happy. His fiancée was nice enough. Habit distant, but polite. My parents adored her already, had been posting photos of her with my mom on Facebook with captions about gaining a daughter. I had been their daughter for 32 years, but I understood. I let it go. We pulled off the highway and wound down the familiar 2-lane road through the trees. The leaves were at their peak, that ridiculous show of orange and red and gold that makes you understand why people drive hours just to look at them. Lily stirred in the back seat as the car slowed. Mark squeezed my knee again. "You good?" he said. "I'm good," I said. The cottage came into view at the end of the gravel lane, warm light spilling from every window, cars parked along the side in the grass. I could see the fire pit was already going. Someone had hung a little banner across the porch railing. It looked like a holiday card. It looked like the kind of family I had always wanted us to be. Mark parked and I unbuckled Lily from her car seat. She was groggy and warm and she wrapped her arms around my neck and said, "Are we there?" into my hair. I carried her up the porch steps, smelling the lake and the smoke and the turkey, and for one single moment I felt it that old feeling. That this was home. My mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked at me. Then she looked past me at Mark, then down at Lily. Something moved across her face that I couldn't name at the time but understood perfectly later. "Oh," she said. Not hello, not come in, just oh. "Hey Mom," I said. "We brought cranberry sauce." "Lily, say hi to Grandma." Lily lifted her head from my shoulder and said hi Grandma in her small sleepy voice. My mom's expression did something complicated. She stepped outside and pulled the door mostly closed behind her, the way people do when they don't want others to hear. "Sweetheart," she said, and the word landed wrong. Too soft, too careful. "I thought you got my message." "What message?" "I sent you a text this morning. I said the cottage was going to be full this weekend. Your brother's whole future in-laws are here, all the way from Vancouver. It's a lot of people, and we don't have the space." I stood there on the porch in the October cold, holding my 5-year-old daughter, listening to my mother tell me there was no space for me at the Thanksgiving table in the cottage my grandparents had owned since 1987. The cottage where I had spent every Thanksgiving of my life. The cottage I had helped my parents reshingle the roof on 3 summers ago. "Mom," I said, very slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe this year you and Mark could find a little inn somewhere nearby. There's that cute place in Gravenhurst. It would be like a little getaway for you two." Behind her, through the gap in the door, I could hear people laughing. I could hear my brother's voice, loud and comfortable, telling some story. I could hear the specific pitch of the room being full and warm and happy without me in it. "You're asking me to leave," I said. My mom touched my arm. "I'm asking you to be flexible. Just this once." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at her for a long moment, and then I looked down at Lily, who was watching my face with the specific careful attention that children have when they know something is wrong but don't know what it is. She had Gerald the stuffed rabbit pressed against her chin. "Okay," I said. I turned around and walked back down the porch steps. Mark was still at the car, pulling our bags from the trunk. He looked up when he heard my feet on the gravel. He took one look at my face and set the bags back down. "Get in the car," I said. "I'll explain when we're driving." We drove. I stared out the passenger window at the lake glinting through the trees. Lily had woken up fully by then, and she kept asking where we were going, and why weren't we staying with Grandma, and Mark was answering her questions in a calm, steady voice, while I pressed my fingers against my mouth and tried to hold myself together. At some point, Lily said, very quietly, from the back seat, "Does Grandma not want us there?" I turned around and looked at her. She was 4.5 going on 40, this kid. She missed nothing. "Grandma loves you very much," I said. "There's just a lot of people at the cottage this weekend." Lily looked at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "But we're people too." Something cracked open in my chest when she said that. I turned back toward the window so she wouldn't see my face. Mark reached over and took my hand and held it the whole way into Gravenhurst. We found a room at a bed and breakfast on the edge of town. It was actually a lovely place, a big Victorian house with a wraparound porch and quilts on the beds, and a host named Patricia who took one look at Lily and immediately produced a cookie from somewhere. Under any other circumstances, it would have been charming. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall while Mark got Lily settled with the TV and a juice box. I checked my phone. My mom had in fact sent me a text that morning. I had missed it completely, had been loading the car when it came through. It said, "Hey Han, just want to give you a heads up. The cottage is pretty packed this weekend with Derek's future in-laws. Might be easier if you guys did your own thing. XO." I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the quilt. I thought about the drive up here. I thought about the cranberry sauce in the cooler in the trunk. I thought about the new sweater I had put on that morning standing in front of the bathroom mirror, telling myself this year would be different. I thought about Lily saying, "But we're people too." Then my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be my mom calling to soften it, to add more words around the things she had already done. But the name on the screen was my uncle, my mom's older brother. He had retired early after selling his plumbing supply business, and now spent most of his time at his property in Dundas and traveling. He was 71 years old, and he was the kind of man who shook your hand when you arrived somewhere and looked you directly in the eye and remembered what you had told him last time. He had come to my nursing school graduation when my parents were in Mexico. He had sent Lily a card on every single birthday since she was born, with a handwritten note inside. "Hello?" I said. "Where are you?" His voice was quiet, but there was something underneath it. "We're at a bed and breakfast in Gravenhurst." "Uncle, it's fine. I'm outside," he said. "I just pulled up. Claire, I need you to tell me exactly what happened." I told him. I sat on the edge of the bed in that Victorian B&B, and I told him everything, the porch, my mom's face, Lily asking if Grandma didn't want us there. My voice stayed mostly steady until that last part, and then it didn't. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Go back to the cottage," he said. "Take your time, drive slow if you need to, but come back." "Uncle, I'm not going to." "Trust me," he said. "I need you to trust me on this. Come back." I looked across the room at Mark. He had heard all of it. He raised his eyebrows and I raised mine back, and then I stood up. We checked out of the bed and breakfast. Patricia was lovely about it and refused to charge us for the hour, and gave Lily another cookie for the road. We drove back through the dark October trees toward the cottage. My uncle met us at the end of the lane. He was standing by his truck with his hands in the pockets of his jacket, and when he saw our headlights, he walked over. He opened the back door and unbuckled Lily himself, and carried her toward the cottage like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Patricia says hi." Lily told him very seriously. "I'll have to meet Patricia sometime," he said. I hung back with Mark for a second. "What is he doing?" Mark said quietly. "I genuinely don't know," I said. Inside, the room went slightly quieter when we walked in. My brother was on the couch with his arm around his fiancée. Her parents were at the big farm table, glasses of wine in front of them, pleasant, confused expressions on their faces. My dad was by the fireplace. My mom was in the kitchen doorway, and when she saw me, her expression shifted through several things very fast. My uncle set Lily down on the floor, and she immediately went to find the dog. Then he walked to the center of the room and stood there. "I'd like everyone's attention for a few minutes," he said. The room settled. My uncle had a particular quality that made rooms settle around him. He had never been loud or dramatic about it. He just had weight. "I've been part of this family for 71 years, he said. "I've watched this family grow and change and sometimes make each other proud and sometimes make each other very sad. Tonight I'm sad." My mom started to say something, and he held up one hand, gently, and she stopped. "A few months ago, I made some decisions about my estate. My lawyer and I have been working on it since spring. I want to share some of those decisions tonight, because I think the timing is right." My brother shifted on the couch. His fiance's parents exchanged a glance. My uncle reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out a folded piece of paper. He didn't make a big performance of it. He just unfolded it and held it. "My property in Dundas," he said, "and my investment accounts, which together are worth approximately $900,000, have been designated in my will." I heard my mom draw in a small breath. "I want to be clear about why," my uncle said, "because the why matters more to me than the what." He looked at me across the room. "Claire," he said, "when you were in nursing school, you worked 2 jobs and took out loans and never once asked for help. When Patricia, your grandmother, not your new friend, was in the hospital 2 years ago and needed someone to be there every day during her treatment, you drove from Guelph twice a week for 4 months. When I had my surgery last year, you called me every single day for 3 weeks to check in. You didn't tell anyone you were doing it. You just did it." The room was completely silent. The fire was crackling. "I also want to tell everyone something else," he said, "because some things have come to my attention recently that I should have addressed sooner." He reached into his pocket again, and this time took out his phone. He turned it toward my brother. "3 weeks ago," he said, "I got a call from an appraiser in Aurelia. He wanted to verify ownership of a Hamilton Tiger Cats pennant and some hockey memorabilia that had been brought in for sale. Items from the late 1960s. He had my name from old paperwork." He paused. "Those items were from a box in your grandmother's basement storage, a box that had been there since before she passed. A box that was never inventoried or distributed because she passed before the estate was fully settled." My brother said, "I can explain." "I know you can," my uncle said. "You'll have the chance." He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing. He never raised his voice. "You brought them to be sold without telling anyone, without asking. Items that belonged to your grandfather. Items I had been intending to keep for sentimental reasons." My brother's fiance's parents were very still at the table. "I also," my uncle said, "received a message from your cousin David last week." He sent me a screenshot of a message thread. He looked at my mom and my dad. A thread that I was apparently not supposed to see, where this weekend's plans were discussed. My mom stood very straight in the kitchen doorway. In that thread, he said, "My sister explained to her son that the cottage would be full and that it would be better if Claire and her family didn't come. This was discussed and agreed upon before the message was ever sent to Claire." He folded the paper back up and put it in his pocket. "I want to be honest with all of you. I've watched a pattern in this family for a long time, and I've stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I'm not going to do that anymore." He turned to my brother's future in-laws. "I apologize," he said genuinely. "You flew here from Vancouver for a lovely Thanksgiving weekend and you're sitting in the middle of something you didn't ask to be part of. I hope you'll forgive us." The father from Vancouver said, looking slightly stunned, that of course no apology was necessary. My uncle sat down in the armchair by the window like he had simply finished saying what needed to be said. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Lily came back from wherever she had been with the dog and climbed up into my uncle's lap completely uninvited and said, "Is it time to eat yet? Because I had a cookie at Patricia's, but that was a while ago." My uncle put his arm around her and said, "I believe it is, actually." My brother stood up. He was red in the face and I could see him doing the thing he always did when he was caught building up to a performance, a justification, a way to make himself the one who had been wronged. He looked at me. He looked at my parents. He looked at my uncle. And then, for the first time in my memory, he didn't perform. He sat back down. He looked at the floor. My dad, who had been standing by the fireplace the whole time not saying a single word, walked across the room and put his hand on my shoulder. Just that. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. My mom was a harder story. She stood in the kitchen doorway for a long time, and I could see her arranging and rearranging her thoughts, looking for the version of this where she was not the one in the wrong. She was my mother, and I knew how to read her face better than I knew how to read almost anything else. I watched her find it the moment where the reframing didn't hold anymore, where the story she had been telling herself about being reasonable, about managing logistics, about just needing a little flexibility from her daughter, simply didn't survive contact with what had just been said out loud in that room. She came over to me. Her eyes were wet. "I don't know when I stopped making you feel like you mattered," she said. "But I know I did. And I'm sorry, Claire. I want to tell you I forgave her instantly, and everything was warm and healed, and we sat down to the best Thanksgiving dinner of my lives." That's not exactly what happened. What happened was that I nodded, and I let her hug me, and I hugged her back because she was still my mom and I loved her even when she hurt me. The rest of it, the real work of it, was going to take longer than one conversation. I knew that. She knew that too, I think. We ate. The turkey was good. Patricia's cranberry sauce, which I had made from scratch, was a hit with the Vancouver family, who asked for the recipe. Lily ate approximately one dinner roll and fell asleep on the couch at 7:30 with Gerald tucked under her arm and my uncle's dog curled up at her feet. Mark and I washed dishes together after dinner. He handed me things to dry and I dried them, and we didn't talk much and it was enough. Later, after everyone had gone to bed or gone quiet, I sat with my uncle on the porch. The lake was dark and still. There were more stars than you can ever see in the city, the kind of sky that makes you feel small and right-sized at the same time. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know," he said. "It's a lot of money to tell someone out loud." He shrugged. "Money's just money. I've seen what happens when families only talk about it after someone's gone. I'd rather have the conversation while I'm still here to have it." "What about the memorabilia? Did the appraiser?" "I've already spoken to a lawyer about recovering the items. They hadn't been sold yet, fortunately." He was quiet for a moment. "Your grandfather loved those things. He went to games with his father when he was a boy. I should have thought more carefully about leaving that storage unsettled." "That wasn't your fault." "No," he said, "but I could have been paying more attention." We sat in the quiet for a while. The wind moved through the birch trees. "Lily's a remarkable kid," he said. "She really is," I said. "She gets it from her mother." I laughed a little. It came out wobbly, but it was real. I thought about the morning, about standing in my kitchen in Guelph, putting on a new sweater and telling myself this year would be different. I thought about the porch, my mom's face, the door pulled almost closed. I thought about the drive to Gravenhurst with my hand pressed against my mouth. I thought about Lily's voice in the back seat saying, "But we're people too," and how I had turned to the window so she couldn't see me. I thought about all the years I had shown up quietly to hospitals, to difficult phone calls, to work that nobody noticed, and how for a long time I had told myself it didn't matter whether anyone noticed, that I was doing it for the right reasons, and that was enough. And it was enough. That part was true. But I also understood, sitting on that porch, that being seen wasn't the same thing as needing approval. I had spent so long confusing the two that I had almost convinced myself I didn't need either. My uncle had seen me, had been seeing me quietly for years, had thought to call a lawyer in the spring and put it in writing before any of tonight had happened. Not because of what I might inherit someday, but because he understood something about fairness that I had stopped believing families were capable of. The cottage light went off in the main room. Someone upstairs was still up, a thin line of light under a door. The stars stayed where they were. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," my uncle said. "Just keep doing what you're doing." We stayed out there until the cold got too real to ignore, which in October in Muskoka doesn't take long. Then we went inside and I covered Lily with the quilt from the back of the couch without waking her, and I went to bed. In the morning it snowed. Just a little, just enough to dust the dock and the tops of the canoes and the last of the yellow leaves. Lily woke up and pressed her face against the window and said "snow" in a voice like she was the first person ever to see it. We had breakfast, all of us, together. It was imperfect and slightly careful in the way that things are after real conversations have been had. My brother was quieter than usual. His fiancé's parents turned out to be genuinely lovely. Two retired school teachers from North Vancouver who had been married for 40 years and knew how to fill a room with something comfortable. My dad made his bad pancakes that Lily loved. My mom refilled everyone's coffee without being asked. Mark leaned over to me while we were eating and said quietly, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. And then, "Actually, yeah." On the drive home, Lily fell asleep again around Barry, her cheek against the window, Gerald in her hands. The snow had stopped. The trees were bare now or going bare, the leaves done with their performance for the year. Mark drove and I sat in the passenger seat and watched the highway. I didn't know yet exactly what the months ahead would look like. I knew my relationship with my mom was going to take work, real work, the kind neither of us had been doing. I knew my brother and I had years of one-sided dynamics to untangle, and that he might not be willing to do that untangling. I knew my uncle was 71 years old, and that nothing he had put in any document changed the fact of that. But I also knew that Lily was asleep in the back seat with her rabbit, and her complete uncomplicated certainty that she deserved to take up space in the world. That she had gotten that from somewhere. that I wanted her to always have it, no matter what room she walked into and what she found on the other side of the door. I leaned my head against the window. Outside, the last of the Thanksgiving light was doing something beautiful with the clouds over Georgian Bay. The kind of thing you see for a second and then it's gone, but you don't mind because you caught it. I caught it.